panel now. Leslie Marshall, Guy Benson, both syndicated radio hosts and Fox News contributors. Leslie, Guy, thanks for joining me. Leslie, I come to you first. What does justice look like for Mayor Lightfoot and many Democratic leaders who were refusing help from the federal government? Yet, I mean, I heard her call for it. She wants to lean in with, more of an open heart, if you will. That's fine. There's room for thoughts and prayers, but you got to take action too.
Absolutely. And since Monday, we've seen a softer and different tone from the mayor of Chicago, who, when she was talking with what the federal officers in her city would look like as more of a collaboration, and that they would not be the federal officials, federal law enforcement officials, be involved with protest, but more with gun violence, then she's on board. Sadly, I used to live in Chicago. I lived there for 4 years, loved the city. But sadly, a problem, whether crime has been up or down in Chicago, is the gang violence. And that is what police are attributing this latest horrific slaying of these individuals outside mourning, outside a funeral home. Gangs, guns, and drugs are a terrible combination, and they're a terrible combination in Chicago that continues to lead to this violence. This incident was not related, according to the police, to the protest, but the violence there, the bloodshed there, it certainly has to stop.
Yeah, so when you say that, though, Leslie, and Guy, I'll come to you on this, the politics that ushered her into office had to do with her ability to deal with some of that, precursor to the violence that we're seeing now, which was more violence like the violence we're seeing now. So if she didn't have a plan then, does she have a plan now? And how different will it be? Because that didn't work out, and now we're here.
Right, well, she campaigned with a plan, and the plan, unfortunately, isn't working. And there are not easy solutions to these problems. Leslie's exactly right in that Chicago has been plagued by this kind of violence for a very long time. I lived there as well for almost 7 years. I love Chicago very deeply. But this was a problem when I was there. It was a problem before I got there, and it's been a problem ever since I left and moved to Washington. And, there are issues with the Chicago police. There are these fraught ties between the law enforcement community, some of these neighborhoods, political leadership. And I think what's especially unfortunate and distressing to a lot of people is that some of the politicians there appear to be more interested in getting into finger pointing, chest puffing, power matches with the federal government with the subtext of battling President Trump than actually cleaning up a giant problem that's not just a theoretical problem, it's a human problem that is playing out with horrific results every single week in that city.
So, I asked both of you this question. I'll go to one and then the other. But I'm looking at this video that's playing out on the screen. Who do those people think that their city belongs to? Do they think they own that city, or does it belong to America? It's an American city. They're within the borders of America. So when the federal officers, and it's interesting because now the mayor of Lightfoot can't say, well, all these people are coming from the outside. No, the president's going to reassign some of those already on the ground. Just like when National Guard come onto your streets, many of them live already in those communities, or at least have been assigned to those communities already. So this will be interesting to watch her then yet again pivot, Leslie. So my question is, the autonomous zones, the horrible things that are being thrown at cops and all the things that are playing out on the screen, who are these people in the streets that they think that they can press the mayor like this? Or do they just know that she won't do anything?
Oh, I don't think that's why they're doing it. I think they're doing it because of anger. Certainly, these are not the majority of protesters in that city or other cities.
I never said protester.
To me, when you look at it, Harris, Chicago's very different than the other cities because, and I agree with Guy, Chicago has had, regardless, by the way, of Republican or Democratic leadership as mayors or governors or other officials in that state, Chicago has had a problem with crime, and Chicago has specifically had, especially on the South Side, a big problem with black-on-black, African-American on African-American crime. And drugs and gangs have largely contributed to making that a powder keg in that city. And again, I think there's concern by many mayors when they look at what they have seen happen in Portland after the feds came in. They're concerned that would happen in their city. But Chicago, again, a very different monster, if you will, with regard to crime, as opposed to the other cities that we're looking at that have had some of this violence come out since the protest started.
All right. By the way, it's okay to say black on black crime. No, I can't imagine anybody who's going to make too big of a difference between that and African American on African American crime, which is much harder to say. Meanwhile, protesters in Portland, and you just mentioned this, Leslie, and I should say not even protesters. These are people who are disrupting, right?
Yes.
They're violence doers. I don't know where the peaceful protesters are in this. I hope they're home and safe. But these people in front of you are criminals. And they are clashing with federal officers again last night, throwing objects at them, doing harm to the building, setting things. I mean, it is unbelievable, the chaos there. Tearing plywood from a government building. Now acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf is defiant as Oregon's Democratic governor again calls for the feds to leave. Watch.
If you are a violent rioter looking to inflict damage to federal property or law enforcement officers, you need to find another line of work. We will not retreat. We will continue to take the appropriate action to protect our facilities and our law enforcement officers.
Wow. What do you think about that? Trump troops, Guy?
It seems like the so-called leadership of Oregon and Portland want to make their city a sanctuary city or a sanctuary state for violent rioting. That's what I take away from the responses from these Democratic politicians in that city and in that state. I would commend to your audience some pieces that have been written today and yesterday by Jonathan Turley, a left-leaning law professor, Andy McCarthy, one of our colleagues here at Fox News, a former prosecutor, talking about some of the legal distinctions here. Yeah, I think it's completely reasonable to ask some questions about federal officers' tactics. There looks like there's one episode caught on tape that's disturbing that looks like brutalization. But let's be clear, you have violent agitators attacking a federal building, and the federal government has every right to defend that federal property and to defend the rule of law in that context. And for the local leaders to say, we don't want this, get out of here, well, they haven't been doing the job. They have not been getting the job done. This is now almost 2 consecutive months of violent upheaval every single night in that city. And so their derelict and their crocodile tears about the feds seems like an attempt to deflect blame and deflect attention away from their own failures.
Well, there's no freedom there. I mean, think about it. If you wanted to walk on your street and you live near those areas, right? And you have a stroller and you and your family just want to take a walk around the block right as sun sets. These cities are beautiful. Yeah. You're rethinking that because this stuff is breaking out and it is dangerous. Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York is also pushing back against the president today. Watch.
The United States to be sending in federal officials to do work which they are not supposed to be doing, to not only monitor protests, but to interfere with protests. As the president said very bluntly, to quote unquote dominate protests. That is dangerous, dangerous thinking. What we see in Portland is that the federal presence is actually making the situation worse. And we cannot allow that here in New York City nor anywhere else in the country.
The words were hanging like a thought bubble when this came out. De Blasio being mocked in his own city with a new banner on the Staten Island Expressway showing him wearing a t-shirt of late Marxist revolutionary Che Guevara and holding the severed head of Lady Liberty. Leslie?
Look, when you look at Portland and you look at the facts, by the end of June, largely there were hardly any violent outbursts. And when the feds came on the scene at the beginning of July, the violence did increase. At first, the feds were there, and their responsibility, the reason they were there, was to protect federal property. But when that nonviolent protester was shot in the face and has suffered a skull fracture as a result, people got angry and then further got angry because you spoke about freedom, Harris, when unmarked vans were going around picking people up with individuals who did not have name tags, did not identify themselves, wearing military garb, camo, and people who said they weren't even being Mirandized, and then they were being released and still to this day don't even know why they were picked up in the first place. That's what Bill de Blasio and others, even the mayor of Chicago, fear, because it has gotten worse since the feds came into Portland.
I've got to go, but I want to give Guy a last word on all of this. She said a lot there, Leslie. Any part of it you want to pick up on?
I'm fine debating some of the tactics. What should the police be wearing in terms of insignias at the federal level when they're carrying out their duties? But these violent rioters tried to set a federal courthouse on fire repeatedly. And the city and the state is basically unequipped or unwilling to deal with it, and the feds have moved in. It's within their power, and I think the problem here is the agitators, not the federal government.
Yeah. The acting DHS Deputy Secretary Ken Cuccinelli told me about the markings all over, and the one thing that was not on them were their last names, something that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Congresswoman, has called for. And there are reasons for that have been explained. We won't get into it now, why you wouldn't put the name. But a lot of the other markings that Leslie would want to see and what AOC would want to see are in fact on that clothing. However, it's dark. And that complicates matters too on what people can see. All right, we'll move. Meanwhile, Hillary and Chelsea Clinton have put the president on full blast while discussing their new book.
I try to be as active as I can in doing what we must do over the next months to try to have a different outcome in the election.
The Trump administration was not kind of prepared and purposely not prepared to help protect our public health and Americans' lives from COVID-19.
The power panel is back now, Leslie Marshall and Guy Benson. And I just want to draw attention to one more time that the White House has come out with a response, and it is full-throated. The president knows very well how to provide hope and lead an all-of-America effort on this. Leslie?
Oh, I don't agree. I think one of the reasons that you're seeing the president talk so much about law and order is because the economy, which was a strong point, is not doing well on the heels of this COVID pandemic. And the president has not done well if you look at the polls across the board with his handling of this pandemic. He's finally coming out and saying, wear a mask, I have a mask, social distance, wear one, especially if you can't social distance. And I commend him for that. But it's very late. That should have started at the outset. So I agree with everything that I'm hearing regarding the president's response. And, you know, one of the things I like with former leaders, such as Harry Truman, the buck stops here. I like that in a leader, Harris. I really do. And I feel that the president missed that for himself, and it would have helped him, I think, with those voters, even on the left, if he had tried to unite us and if he had tried to lead more forcefully and maybe looked at what some other countries had done and taken COVID-19 more seriously at the onset.
You know, Guy, when I sat down with the president a few weeks ago in Dallas, Texas, at that beautiful megachurch, that was my first question. Are you the president to unite us?
That's part of, I think, the struggle of any president during very difficult times, to be a uniting force in the country. I think President Trump's record on that is mixed, to put it kindly. Some of that's on him. Some of that's on his resistance from the very beginning. Didn't want to be unified by anyone, wanted to be angry. Look, in terms of some of that criticism, I have to smirk a little bit listening to President Obama talking about the buck stops with him and the great leadership that he always exhibited. I seem to recall a lot of comments about all the problems that he inherited from the previous administration. We heard that a lot from him, and a lot of blaming of Republicans as well. So maybe just ease off on that a little bit. It's not that long ago, Mr. President. And, you know, the Clintons, they can say whatever they want. I almost fell asleep during Chelsea Clinton's soundbite there. They're going to be throwing rocks from the sidelines. Fine. They can make fair points, unfair points. I think the more Hillary Clinton specifically speaks, the more it might help President Trump, because we remember how last time turned out and how Hillary Clinton's poll numbers are still really bad.
Look, I know you're always glad to get a friend or a surrogate or somebody to talk for you, but yeah, why are the Clintons, Hillary and Chelsea, in this? Do you have a strategy idea about that, Leslie?
Well, first of all, Hillary Clinton is an incredible fundraiser. So she brings in millions of dollars to various Democratic campaigns, including the Biden campaign. Second of all, you know, maybe she's not running and maybe her approval's not really high, but she won the popular vote. She's the
Wait, say
first
it again.
female
Say it again.
Democratic
She's
nominee
not
for
running.
president. No, she's not. She's not running, but she is supporting others that run. And that's what people who ran before or have been in public life. She was a senator. She was a first lady. She was Secretary of State. She's certainly doing what other people, left or right, have done in the past once they are no longer in those roles. And then her daughter's book is the third in a series that comes out in September. She's supporting her daughter, and I think it's a great book series. I purchased the other two for my daughter.
So, Guy, I'll give you a quick last word on this. And I made in jest, she's not running. I mean, there were times when we weren't sure yet, just a few months ago.
I'm not sure if she was sure, right? I think she's had this almost lifelong ambition that got so disrupted in 2008. She thought she had it then disrupted again in 2016. She thought she had it. She didn't. But I will agree with Leslie. We can end on this note, agreement, where Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, what they have in common for Joe Biden is they are prolific fundraisers and will help him fill his coffers and be very competitive. The DNC has been sucking wind, but with people like Hillary and Obama helping Biden, I think that they'll be very flush with cash, and it's going to be a tough election for both sides.
All right. A moment of agreement. Cash money. Thank you both.